Hey everybody, Mike Chipperini at Chipper's Island Adventures. And today we just made a journey over to Gettysburg National Park. Or, as I should say, Gettysburg National Military Park. And right now we're at the Museum and Visitor Center. We arrived here yesterday, late yesterday, after a long drive from Nashville. So we're gonna go ahead and tour around there a little bit. It's a pretty good sized park. You can do it all in a couple hours, but a lot of the information can be a little overwhelming. So we're gonna pick out a couple select points to check out. So stay tuned as we go ahead, get in the RV and take the auto tour around the park, and we'll do some stops to show you some vital areas that are really interesting. So I'm here in the Gettysburg Battlefield National Park, and where we are is on top of this hill, and this hill has a magnificent view. And what happened is Confederate General Robert Rhodes arrived here, and he set up his artillery along this hill. As you can see, he set his artillery up, and then Union forces started arriving and coming up trying to take the hill. You can see the battle here. This is where we are right now. These are the Confederate forces, and the Union tried to take the hill, but Rhodes held the hill. That was his basically only battle up here, was that day, because the Union fell back and started protecting over in that direction. They set their perimeter up further back. They pulled back because this hill is the only high ground here. So Rhodes actually protected this hill, but it was almost for naught because then the Union pulled back anyway. But here on this hill is an eternal flame that burns for peace. And 1,800 Confederate and 1,800 Civil War soldiers came here and helped dedicate that when that flame, and you can't really see the flame is burning, when that was put in place. Look at this land. And back of me, what we see here is the Army of Northern Virginia. This was their line right along here. And you can see all these cannon going all the way up. And this is on the second day where the Union forces had moved back from that hill that I just filmed a bit ago and moved forward, and now we had a new line. Now bear in mind, a lot of these trees weren't here, so the landscape was a lot different then. But this would be part of the line of the Army of North Virginia. And as I say, you can see all the cannon. There's a whole row of them up there as well. So where I'm walking out to is one of the major events of the Gettysburg battle. And that is what is referred to as Pickett's last charge. Now General Pickett had about, I'd say, 4,000 men under his leadership. And he really wanted to get into the fight. And he hadn't been in the fight up to the third day. So what happens is Lee finally puts him into battle, him and his division of men, to attack the Union center, which Lee felt was probably the weakest point. And he felt that Pickett could march over there and break the Union line. Well, that Union center had just been reinforced, unintentionally reinforced, by the 20th Maine, which had been protecting Little Round Top. They were given a break and sent down to the Union center where there wasn't as much fighting. Well, no sooner does the 20th Maine get down there, and now we begin with Pickett's last charge. And he begins his charge by basically walking through this area, which wasn't here. This is all farmland. These trees, this is all new growth, but he would walk across this area much like this field right here. And he and his men would literally walk across 1.5 miles of open land into the Union Center while being barraged by cannon fire from the Union side. So they basically emerged out of this area here, marching up, and the way they would march is they'd kind of zigzag to keep the Union artillery having to shift their cannon, because they got to work to shift the cannon to make it accurate, right? You see how these cannon work. You can't just move the cannon left and right. You got to shift the whole thing to move it. Basically, all you have control over is elevation. So basically, Pickett's last charge came out of this area, across this field. The cannons opened up, gave a barrage on the Union Center, which is basically right in here up on that ridge. And this is the Union line. The Union line comes all the way up, goes up, over to these hills. That's Big Round Top over here with Little Round Top right there. And that's where the end of the Union line is. But this is the center. And they go straight up, zigzagging along the way, making oblique turns and stuff, in order to take that Union Center. They got wiped out. 4,000 men, along with Pettigrew's unit, I believe he had a division, and Tremble's, all those guys were decimated. And to his dying day, Pickett held Lee accountable for the loss of his entire division. And if you look at paintings and stuff like that, the word is that Longstreet, who was under Lee but in charge of Pickett, above Pickett, when Pickett asked permission to move his troops out, Lee couldn't even look at him in the eye because he knew it was a folly of a move. And it did not end well. It was a serious blunder, and it was one of Lee's few blunders. Lee was actually a really good general, and this is probably one of his worst. He assumed that was the weakest point. Unfortunately for him, it had been reinforced by the 20th Maine, and with the cannon there were good cannon guys up there, good artillerymen. The Union held the line. But imagine walking across here 1.5 miles out, and you can't even see it on this camera, but there's a obelisk up there, and that is about as far as they got. And you walk 1.5 miles out with people shooting at you, with cannons aimed right at you, and you get out there and it's 90 degrees heat. You're in wool uniforms, carrying heavy weapons that have to be hand loaded. Unbelievable. Here at the site of Pickett's last charge. So where I'm standing now is directly across from where Pickett began his charge and got to about this point. A few hundred of the men who came across that field were able to break the line, but they were beat back by the Union forces. 1.5 miles out, if we look straight over, we can see the monument across. And basically in that wood line was where Pickett gave his charge, began it, and then walked this way. And you can see the battle depicted here in this picture. And out here also Lewis Armistead would pierce his hat and lead the charge and break the wall of the Union Army, but it was not held long. Here you see the memorial for Lewis Armistead, Brigadier General, and he fell here after coming 1.5 miles across this field. And this was the Union line. They broke the wall, not the wall, but the line of the Union, and he got this far before he was finally mortally wounded. He would die 2 days later, but he fell here. As I said, you know, this was the Union Center. Way down there is Little Round Top, and on the other end is the other side of the Union, I'll call it the right. But this was supposed to be the weakest point according to Lee. That's why he came across this wide open ground and attacked here. He thought he could break through and divide the Union line, but that didn't work. And this is where the great battle occurred. So here you see, before you is the monument to the 44th New York Infantry on Little Round Top Summit. It is the largest and most expensive of the hundreds of regimental monuments placed on the battlefield by surviving veterans. Pretty neat. It all overlooks this area.
All right, good.
So where I am right now, I'm on top of the New York Monument, which is the most expensive monument put in here at this area on top of Little Round Top. And where I am, this was the end of the Union line. Basically, you had the New York forces here, and then it wrapped around, and the 20th Maine was down around the corner here and across the street. But looking out here, you can envision this battlefield. This was known as Devil's Den down here. It was a brutal fighting area. And along over here, you had the apple orchards and the peach orchards, I believe it was. And I may get some of these facts wrong. I'm not an expert on Gettysburg. I know enough high points and low points of the war to get around, and but I am by no means an expert. But this is a beautiful vantage point to look out over this point, which, as I said, was the end of the Union line. And then the Union line stretched all the way down here, with a lot of the battles taking place out on these fields that you can see on the horizon. But the line, let me see, yeah. So Confederate forces were all across there, all the way down, heading this way, and the Union line stretched that away. So we're going to go take a look at where the 20th Maine pulled off one of the best maneuvers. As we're walking over here where the 20th Maine was positioned with Colonel Chamberlain, I just want to state that if you've never been to Gettysburg and you're in the area, come here, because it's one of the best battlefield sites in the country. And I've been to a couple, not a whole lot, but I will say this one has a lot of history in it, a lot of monuments, a lot of information. So I would highly recommend you come here if you ever get the chance. And here we see the 20th Maine Monument. We're going to cross the road here, which, of course, this road was not here back in the day. So let's take a look at this plaque and see what it says. As you can see here, you can see where Colonel Vincent's order to Chamberlain was to hold the ground at all hazards. And there's a picture here, you might not be able to see it. But basically, he assigns Colonel Chamberlain in the 20th Maine to come along here and hold this line, stating this is the end of the Union line. You cannot be outflanked. So what Chamberlain did is he spread out his troops, but at the end he made a hard right angle, so it was like an L. If you look at it, it goes up and then hard right, and that way there, if he were being outflanked, then they would run into that right angle, and then he performs a brilliant maneuver. But I'm going to get down here and hopefully we can see some information on this. Here you see the monument for the 20th Maine, and this monument was put on the site where Colonel Chamberlain was given the order to hold this line. You are the end of the line. And I believe basically the line came down here and then cut at a hard angle up this way, or something to that effect. But what he did, I want you to picture his unit was at a right angle, like so. So if you look at under my arm, that was the front of the Union line, and then over here was the angle he made. And so what he did was, at one point, after multiple attacks by the Alabamians, they were basically out of ammo. Supposedly he ordered bayonets, and he gave his command, the command to charge, but what he wanted this part to do was come down straight, and once they were parallel with the rest of the unit, they all went forward. And it was a brilliant maneuver. And supposedly the Alabamians thought they were reinforced, the 20th Maine was reinforced, and they retreated. That day was a brutal day because the Alabamians had been attacked multiple times. They lost over a third of their men in casualties. But here's Colonel Chamberlain was not West Point trained or military trained like a lot of the other generals. He was a professor of religion and rhetoric out of Maine. And so when he performed this maneuver, it was a brilliant military strategy. It's still taught in military books today. And it was just really, really good. And he proved himself in battle. He held this hill. And I'm here to tell you that if the Union Army had been 15 to 20 minutes late securing this hill, they would not have occupied the high ground of the Battle of Gettysburg, and this battle would definitely have had a different outcome just based on occupying this high ground. So I just wanted to point out Joshua Chamberlain, who performed absolutely stupendously here. Later, he would be awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, and he would serve 4 terms as governor of Maine. So he had a pretty good life, and he would receive a pretty tough wound here at the Battle of Gettysburg when he took a bullet off his hip. And I'm not sure the extent of that injury, but one of the little interesting facts here. We're going to continue further down the hill and see where we go. Here you see the left flank of the 20th Maine. So picture it goes straight down like so and then cuts right. And that was the 20th Maine. And then they made this gate swing forward till it was parallel with the main line. So imagine it opened up like a gate, pushing the Alabamians back, full bayonet charge forward. Brilliant maneuver. Yeah, you can see it better here. Definitely. Imagine trying to take this ground. Here we are. This is the peak of Little Round Top, and back to me, 20th Maine were further down. And the Alabamians and other units were trying to take this hill, coming from this direction and up this way, all along here. Texas Volunteers, Alabamians, and they knew this was going to be a tough fight, and it was. I'm standing here on the top of Devil's Den, and back of me you can see Little Round Top. Over on the right would be where the 20th Maine was. That's the New York Memorial right up on the hill. So imagine those Confederate troops trying to take that hill on a day, not unlike today. It's about 94 degrees today. So it was brutal. If the Confederates had arrived 15 minutes earlier, they would have had that hill. But just when they started attacking it, it got reinforced by the New York regiments. So basically this plaque says total casualties were 51,000, 23,000 Union and 28,000 Confederate. Devastated both sides. That's a lot of losses in 3 days. The problem could have been for the Confederates that if the North had got their act together and attacked them, the Southern Army would have been finished. But the Southern Army was able to retreat peacefully and they weren't attacked. So very interesting day here at Gettysburg. I've been here 3 times and each time I learn a little bit more. There's a lot to take in. Like I said, I'm not an expert on the Civil War by any stretch. I have read the book Gettysburg, or the Civil War book by Ken Burns. I have read the book The Killer Angels. I've watched the movie Gettysburg, which is pretty much the entire book of The Killer Angels. And you know, it's just a magnificent area to come to and come see this battlefield. If you like this video, feel free to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to my channel. All the best to all, and happy adventuring.